Hey everybody, welcome. This is Dr. Matthew Dunn, host of the Future of Email Marketing podcast, and I'm delighted to have as my guest today, after a whole bunch of silly logistics getting him aboard, Paul Schreiner, who is co-founder and chief evangelist at AudiencePoint. Paul, welcome. I'm so happy to have you on.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this one. Your reputation precedes you.
So does my nose, pal. So does my nose. Tell us a bit about, you. I've got some speed round questions in a second, but how did you end up doing what you're doing? Because you've got quite a diverse background.
That is true. And I kind of backed my way into email a little bit. I don't want to say accidentally, because that really does sound like I'm stumbling and bumbling, but sometimes you pick the industry and sometimes it picks you. And in this case, it was one where it picked me.
Yeah.
Of all things, I was on staff with Young Life. I was the area director
That's right.
for Young Life on the Olympic Peninsula. So Port Townsend, Port Angeles, and Forbes.
Right.
And the things that are true about that, which makes it kind of interesting, or the story kind of interesting, is rural poverty, small towns,
Right.
so low population bases, and you have to raise your budget from those areas. At least that's the model that Young Life uses, is you would raise from within your own community. The challenge was, these are people that didn't have money.
Right.
They're driving school bus, they're driving truck. That's how they paid their bills. And while any amount that was given felt like an incredible gift, and it did. It was also very it was difficult. It was difficult to raise money there, because while your $100 check, I know the impact that had on your family to give, it didn't pay the bills the way bigger checks would, if that made sense. And so
Right.
I sort of early on went to the conclusion, okay, I need to raise from outside my community to sort of pay for this effort. And so I was sending out emails, and things were,
wow.
I've always been a pretty good writer, storyteller. I wave my hands, like this is always who I've been. And so started sending emails out.
Yeah.
What I found was there's people I was missing.
When was this? Like, just historically?
Oh, yeah. So this would have been, I started on staff 2004 and left staff about 2016, 2015, I want to say.
Okay.
And so I would say we're talking like 2005, 2006.
Okay.
So sending emails, it was mostly newsletters. Hey, here's what's going on. And there was always an ask at the end that was sort of a gentle ask. Like, if you want to be part of this, let me know. Right.
Right.
So I was sending emails out, and what was happening was I would follow up with phone calls for the important people and say, hey, I don't know if you got that email. Would love for you to participate. And what was interesting was there's a lot of people who'd be like, no, I didn't get your email.
Oh, wow.
And so, like, my current business partner, I sent him an email, sent it out at 11 o'clock at night, Port Townsend time, send, right? And so I called him. He's like, I didn't get the email. I don't know what you're talking about. And I was like, I sent it to you. Check your email. I sent it at 11 o'clock. And so he goes to 11 o'clock and he's like, I don't see anything. And I was like, well, you're Eastern time, so that's going to be 2 a.m. your time. And he said, you sent me an email at 2 a.m. And I said, no, I sent you an email at 11 o'clock. He's like, but it says it's here at 2 a.m. And I was like, time zones, man. That's the way they work, right? But at the same time, it was representative of this bigger problem, right? Which, at least at the time, which was, one size does not fit all. I can't just blast an email out and hope that everyone hits it. And so Andy's like, I don't know what to tell you. You're a nerd. Solve this problem. And so, because my solution is never, let me just Google a bunch of solutions. It's like, I'm a programmer. I bet I can figure this out, right? And so it hits me. I was like, okay, what if we kept track of when people open email,
right,
and then send it at that point? And so did that, saw a pretty meaningful lift. And where does this fit? How does it fit? It was in email.
Right.
At first I thought it was probably much more social. No, it was email. And then the more time I've spent in the industry, the more just kind of how my brain works, where here's a problem, here's a solution, has kind of fit. And this is an industry that's sort of, I don't want to say begging for innovation, but it's certainly, I think that's part of the interest of your show here, right? Like, how do we focus on innovation? Because it's an industry that's, I want to say, usually a couple years behind the rest of technology.
Yeah, yeah. And Paul's being modest if you're listening, because he just kind of skated from Port Townsend, which is a small town on the tip of the Olympic Peninsula in Washington, to, what did you tell me, to over 2 billion sort of meaningful core records inside AudiencePoint. That's
Two and a half billion. Yeah.
2.5 billion. But who's
So
counting?
let's talk about that, because like the whole send time optimization thing. Now it's a household name, right?
Right,
But
right.
when we kind of first built it, it was like, hey, I've got this idea, right? And what should we call this thing? I don't know. Like, we've got send and time, and we're optimizing. There it is. Boom.
Yeah,
Send
sold.
time
Yeah,
optimization.
really. Right, right.
And sort of backing our way into it, it was right at the same time Silverpop was releasing kind of their version of the same thing.
Okay.
And it just, without talking to each other, we all kind of landed on, this is what it's going to be called.
Oh, interesting.
Now, early on, and we're kind of victims of our own naivete and ignorance, right? Early on, we were like, we need to store as much data as we possibly can, because that's going to allow us to arrive at better conclusions and better decisions. Where at the time, Silverpop was just kind of taking the last 10 touches and just sort of doing a count and saying, all right, looks like 4 p.m. because there's 2 touches there, 4 o'clock. Where we were like, no, let's store everything anyone's ever done with anyone.
Right.
We built everything from the beginning from this perspective of, we've got this data pool.
Okay.
And with that data pool, it was like, okay, if we're taking this data on, early on, we sort of arrived at this conclusion of like a security by design model, right? If we're going to take people's data, we need to secure it and protect it.
Okay.
And so that was where we started. So as these new legislative instruments, CCPA, GDPR, and there's a bunch more coming, we were prepared for those so that we would be ready. So what do? We take that sort of email address, de-identify it, and then we hang a bunch of sort of what you'd call maybe not all that interesting data on its own when someone opens or clicks an email. And we arrive at a lot of interesting conclusions from that.
Gotcha.
When do they open? How often do they open? When should we target them? And not to mention sort of the implications of like, well, they're engaging with you, but they're not engaging with anyone else in the world, or they're engaging with all of these other brands, but you can't get a pulse. You're missing it. So there's a lot of just like telling your brand story because you have better information.
Right.
And that's kind of what we're doing now. And so, yeah, we went from like, hey, I've got this idea. We're doing it with Young Life, a couple hundred people on my list, to our first customer.
Yeah.
Our first customer was Sony EMEA,
Oh, wow.
Sony Europe, right? They call, they're like, hello, this is Sony. And we're like, oh, right. No, it's not. But you do have an English accent. So that's kind of interesting. Maybe you are who you say you are.
So you guys found some product market fit, kind of snap for a company that big to call you.
We did, and that's, I think, probably what drove a lot of our innovation early.
Right.
But we weren't ready for that kind of scale or volume.
Now
orders of magnitude will have, that's what that does.
Yeah. Let me pause and rewind, and because I try to keep in mind that someone may be listening and not getting a chance to see both of our hands up in the air at points. So if you're an email marketer and you're listening to this and say you're where Paul was a few years back, like, you're sending emails to help keep your business or organization connected to your market or your customers, the audience point proposition, correct me if I don't have this accurate, is that you can connect better by having some intel about their own preferences and things that drive them to read your email, and then you're doing some degree of making that knowledge of that anonymized, de-identified person better, because you may see some patterns about them from someone else who's also an emailer who's also connected to AudiencePoint somehow. Fair?
Right. That's exactly right. Yeah,
Okay.
That is the value proposition.
Okay, fascinating.
And I think the deeper we dive into this domain, there's 2 things that have kind of come to the surface, because you're talking about that person that's emailing. Part of it is, I think, learning to be patient with the data, because the data has a story unto itself. And so where at first it was just like, well, we got to figure out when people are engaging.
Right.
The more we sat with that, the more we were like, well, it's not just when they're engaging, but how old is it, right? How far away from now
Oh,
is
now
it?
you
Okay,
got me
that's a
curious.
factor,
Yeah.
right? What about proximity? So like if you were to sort of take your, a calendar, you'd say you've got sort of weeks and you have days, right? And I'm drawing what looks like a really poorly drawn. I have an art degree, from Seattle
I was
Pacific
going to
University.
ask you about that. Yes.
Yeah, you can tell that's definitely well worth money spent, right? But so your vertical rows, that's going to be your sort of day of week, and you've got your horizontal rows, which would be sort of your week at a time, right?
Yeah.
And so if you start to look and see, are there patterns to that sort of, and because we're all marketers here, and we put our marketing hat on. Quickly early on, I coined those micro patterns because micro patterns sell tickets better. We also could call them click densities or open densities. There's ways to sort of frame that, but the idea is, are there sort of these little patterns that live within this bigger story?
Right.
Okay, so we got to be patient to find those. Is there patterns from, like, are there times when you open more? Are there times when you click more? And depending on what you're trying to accomplish as a marketer, you might use your algorithm to target that accordingly, right? The devil becomes a little bit in the details. How do you align your goals with your technology spend and your effort and all of that?
I'm curious. I want to throw something at you because it's like our worlds intersected a little bit here in terms of campaign genius and real time content.
Right.
Does AudiencePoint have data about the content of the message? You've mentioned time. You've mentioned sender.
Right.
Do you know whether it's words or pictures, repeat message, not repeat message, anything like that?
We don't.
Okay,
we don't. We have just and part of that's right. Like, you choose to know what you want to know because, and you say, I'm going to ignore these other pieces because, and early on I did some stuff around sort of querying the raw headers coming into the message as a Chrome extension, right? And the value exchange here was, let's say you install this Chrome extension on your computer, and the idea was, hey, marketer, we're going to tell you who sent this email to you. In exchange, we'll get to know that you opened that email at that time, right?
Right.
It's the equivalent of, like, if we put a quarter in every slot machine in Las Vegas, we're eventually going to make enough money from that. And so it was really interesting. So I built this really cool Chrome extension, and I'm using this JavaScript library called gmail.js.
Yep.
And allowed me to walk through your entire inbox, and I could steal all of your timestamps, right? Steal is the right word there, right?
Right.
And so I sit down with our attorney and I say, hey, I've got this cool thing. It's amazing. And he was like, we cannot do this.
We cannot do this.
You cannot do this, Paul. And I was like, what are you talking about? I was like, well, look, we can get this, this, and this. And I was like, and I built these filter levels in, so it prevents me from getting access to PII and PHI, right? And he's like, how do you know? He's like, what if there's a subject line that says, hey, Paul, how's that shot going? Right? Like, oh yeah. It's like, you just can't. We can't walk people's inboxes. And so, lesson learned. I don't even know how we got to that particular discussion here, Matthew.
Okay. But well, I asked you about content, right?
Oh yeah. So our attorney said, no, you're not allowed to get into the content game and all. And honestly, probably wise, right?
Yeah. But I mean, there's an interesting boundary condition there on not just the privacy considerations, which are obviously becoming more and more a real live cultural, civic, governmental issue. But the content issue as well. Like, if you're blind to what someone's blind in a technical sense, I guess. If you have to stay blind to what it is they're reading, what it is they're seeing, how it's formatted, or any of those things, the causal spark for their behavior isn't being factored in to the intel, because you can't if you can't know, or and if there's no taxonomy from the marketer that says this was this kind of message or that was that kind of content. Yeah, that's an interesting opportunity. It does point us in a direction that I wanted to go with you as well, because while I'm really interested in talking about the innovative edge of things that are happening with email, like what you guys are doing with send time optimization, it strikes me that where innovation for the last, call it 20 plus years as digital has exploded, has all been about doing new stuff and doing more stuff, right? There's never been a developer who says, I can do more with that. Innovation is also increasingly about doing the right things or better things, not just more. Thoughts?
Right. Yeah. I mean, yes. Like, and this is something we early on thought, well, goodness, we can do all of this with data, but part of the innovation was, are we doing it in a way that honors subscriber intent? Mm-hmm. Are we doing it in a way that honors legislative instruments that live out there, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, we've tried to be very, very cognizant, right, of intent, of what is the subscriber expecting you to do with this data.
Mm-hmm.
I think, yes, it's right here. There you go. That's one of the 5 children.
Awesome.
So yes,
5. Wow.
So yeah, I know, we're gluttons for punishment. So, but that, the idea of yes, innovation certainly is that. I think this has been a conversation we've been having lately internally, right? As we grow up a little bit and grow from just sort of a send time optimization model into how often should I email? What are the signals that exist? How do we package this?
Mm-hmm.
There's a cost to that, right? There's a cost. That freewheeling cowboy, I can do this, pew, 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 where you shoot your 6 guns in the air. The Old West, we have to grow up. And with that, there's a cost to it, right? So what about ISO 27001? What about SOC 2 compliance? How do we both innovate, which is freewheeling, and yes, we can do that stuff, and still adhere to some of those things that are a lot more expensive to cover.
So here's a funny, maybe a slightly pointed way to ask the question. But has AudiencePoint, algorithmically or whatever, ever said to an AudiencePoint customer, what you really should be doing is not mailing this guy or mailing him less?
Yeah, absolutely. We will do that all the time.
Nice.
That's in our wheelhouse usually, but I've also heard from our partners and email service providers and people that fit there, like, yeah, we can't do that because we make money when they email them more. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. Although that's an argument I've got with, and I think you and I have touched on this in past conversations with. Sometimes it seems like the playbook for email marketing, it lags even further behind the technology. I look at myself in my inbox and think, if I heard from you less, but every time it was more on point or more valuable or more whatever, my relationship with you as a company would probably go up. Would I be likely to buy more? I don't know. Separate conversation, right? But my attention is the commodity here. My interest is the commodity here. And if you think you make more money by emailing me more, that's true until your list starts going, go pound sand, unsubscribe, unsubscribe, right? There's tolerance.
And I would say that's a little, where I'd answer that, there's propensity modeling, right? Mm-hmm. And that's a little bit of what we're doing is saying, like, okay, so you do open more, you do click more, you have a propensity to handle more, so we should email you more.
Right.
You open less, you click less. So if we send more email to you, you're not going to open more of it. It's just going to sit in. There's going to be a point where you reach where you're just like, I just can't handle you anymore. love you, Matthew, but I
Yeah.
just
Yeah. Just
unsubscribe.
subscribe, right? Or bozo filter, and you never know.
Right. And
Right.
now I'd like to do some of that deeper dive analysis to say, if we send you less email, are we getting fewer unsubscribes? I think so.
Yeah.
I haven't done that deep dive analysis.
Yeah. Well, one of the things, and again, I'm thinking in terms of a listener who's like, they're just thinking in terms of email for marketing, and you start to realize what an enormous picture wraps around that jejune every day. I just hit send and it magically goes to the other side of the planet and you get it.
Right.
It's like, wow, this is a lot more sophisticated than I thought.
Well, right. And I'll throw one of those things out there because I had a conversation with an agency yesterday. It was really, really fascinating. The story is this. They're working with this brand, and the brand, they click send. Now what's happening is they're seeing their open rates go down.
Okay.
And I'll even give you numbers. They said when we inherited this customer, they were clicking along at about a 30% open rate. They said, wow, right now today, we've made no changes. It is now at a 7% open rate. What is going on? What's the problem here? And I said, well, email is small ball, right? And if you take everything from the perspective that like, just all you have to do is click send. Yeah, there's a whole lot that goes into the simplicity of a single button that says, do this, send, right? And I said, let me tell you what's happened. And they're like, okay, you inherited this list and you're starting to see open rates, click rates go down. And so someone said, we should create a C name for this, mail.brand.com. Right, they're like, that's exactly what we did. I was like, good, wow, that's part of the playbook, right? And then I said, so then what happens is any sort of domain sender reputation that you had is gone.
Right.
So you're having to sort of rewarm these IP addresses. Did you do that? And they're like, yes, we did warm our IPs. So tell me about how you did that. Well, we did small chunks and we grew that. And I was like, okay, were these small chunks that you warmed based off of engagement data? Did you do any sort of modeling around sending your best subscribers first so that these IP addresses? No, we didn't do that. Okay. And so now you're going to see this go down further till you're now at 7%. And the brand that you're working with is saying, is this even worth the program anymore?
Right. Why do we have you guys?
So the simplicity thing is, yes, there's just a button. But I said, here's the thing. In terms of your IP warming, order it from the most engaged to the least engaged, and drop the least engaged in your warming. You're going to see that reputation pop up really quickly. But the other thing that I think is super interesting is even on your regular deployments, if you order your subscribers based off of the most engaged to the least engaged, your mailbox providers, the Gmails, the Yahoos, the Microsofts in the world, say, okay, this is a hot list. They're good. Let them all through.
Right.
And it's really, really fascinating. So even so like that, like how you order your list that gets deployed, when you click send, has a substantial impact on all of those downstream metrics. Delivered.
Yeah. Boy, that's
opened, clicked,
that's
sent,
invaluable.
conversion.
That's invaluable advice because the tool doesn't necessarily, what you think is the tool, right? Your ESP doesn't necessarily tell you to do that first, right? I've used a few dozen, 100, whatever ESPs. And
there's no reason we don't need to date ourselves here. You know what I mean? We're both spring chickens.
Exactly.
No one needs to.
Yeah. Well, no, it's just that layers of complexity beyond just the send button, right? We're paying $1 gazillion for this, fancy cloud platform, and it's like, yeah, you can use me badly or you can use me well, but there's a whole bunch of what smarts and experience distilled into practice are you bringing to that send? It's not all baked into the tool set automatically. Right.
Well, and it'd be ideal if it were.
Is that a potential, audience point as it grows, part of your business to auto sort, for example, for an ESP?
Yeah, I mean, yes, certainly. Certainly we are talking with email service providers and MTAs to say, how can we help get more of your emails through, right? Because at the end of the day, it is in both of our best interests to get more email delivered,
Sure,
right?
sure.
And because that gives the email service provider a competitive advantage over everyone else, and it gives the brand that's doing the sending, so they're more likely to buy from that particular email service provider. Yeah, I mean, there's a value proposition all around that says yes, more email getting through
Yeah.
wins the day.
Wins the day, yeah. Let's take this in a slightly different direction, just because we get to, right?
Right.
One one of the many things that opens up the opportunity for innovation in a field like email is like it's not sitting still with nothing else changing around it. Talk to me a bit without stomping on a trade secret. Like, talk to me a bit about some of the technical components involved in handling 2.5 billion anything.
Right. No, you're
That
right.
wouldn't
And
that wouldn't have been easy a decade ago.
it's not. It's never been easy. And I would say it's still not, right?
Yeah.
Now, especially when you're talking about sort of the inclusion of sort of data governance on top of it. Because we're not just talking about like, hey, can we do this in a way? So like what I mean is, could you spin up a bunch of instances on AWS and be off to the races?
Yeah.
Yeah, probably. Like, back in the day, sharding, just shard your database. That's all you got to do. Just shard it, which I always thought was the worst name.
That's a horrible name. Yeah.
Right. Just shard your database. I don't know who invented that name. It was probably not a good plan.
Oh, God.
Right. Here's the deal done. We got the perfect plan for you. Then that thing where you're talking about splitting your database into different data. The name sharding. Go with it. It's gonna be huge. Shard
it. Right. And you're like, didn't use that in the last 3 years. Thanks for bringing it back up to the top.
Right. So sharding. So like that was the model how we do it. It did it. And you could still do that, of course, but what I think is, some of these newer data repository tools like Cassandra, tools like Elasticsearch, MongoDB, things that are really sort of, how do we stitch big data sets together that are quick to access, quick to retrieve, that are bulletproof. These are new tools, and they have opened the door to being able to answer a lot more questions. Bigtable, Google has that, because it's not just can we store it, can we retrieve it, right? And I think, I don't know if you remember, what was it, 2012, 2013, the big hot thing then was big data, right? We all got big data. We got to get big data, big data, right? It was on everyone's poster. And I don't know who the kid was in the crowd that said the emperor's not wearing clothes, but there's a point where we all went, okay, so what?
Yeah.
So you've got a lot of data.
Big mess.
What does that mean? What do you have? Like, are you just storing ones and zeros, or do you have something that you can do from it? And enter what was that one with the elephant? Hadoop, Hadoop, right? So let's pre-process everything. And so we've tried to figure it out. And I feel like we're finally at this place where the tool set has caught up with some of the thinking. On the topic of innovation, I think this is really, it's been interesting the number of times I kind of land in these types of calls and conversations, because I think I am pretty passionate about it and enjoy this thing. I'll tell you what, if you look back sort of over history, when the majority of the innovation takes place is not when there's the most money on the table. Like, hey, like email's hot right now, right? Because we're seeing lots of acquisitions and all that. Yes, that is the innovation that comes out there. I don't necessarily believe is need-based. That innovation is like, hey, you're spending money. I built your magical thing. That's maybe marketing driven, as opposed to, I need this tool because if I don't have this tool, I cannot function. My business ends, right? It's when your back is against the wall. When you're facing like these really clamped down GDPR or CCPA that says our business cannot continue doing what we're doing because we are hitting this wall.
Right.
That is when those creative solutions are sort of bubbled to the surface that say, I can solve this problem in a way that no one's ever done before, right? Because there is only one solution that will work here, and roll the dice. And it's those moments. Like, when did AudiencePoint happen? When did send time optimization grow out? Which it was innovation, which is now almost 20 years old, right? Or I guess 15 years old.
Mm-hmm.
It was staring at the housing crisis, right?
Oh,
it's
really?
when people, it's going, man, I can't find any non-Young Life work. Like, I was doing Young Life, but I couldn't raise money. It was super, super hard.
Right.
And we were I couldn't pick up any programming work, and I had to raise a budget, or like, hey, wife and family, we won't be able to eat.
Right. Back
and so it's
when
your back is against the wall there that you're like, I don't have another option. Yeah. My option is innovation, period. And so, as we're staring at sort of post-COVID times when people have lost their jobs, our economy is tanked. Mm-hmm. When we are staring now, yes, email is the hot thing right now, but next week it will not be, right? When we're staring at post-COVID, and we're staring at, wow, we've got all of these new data protections in place that feel very constraining. Our entire industry that is based off of information and understanding people will be hamstrung. And it is in those moments that we will see the greatest innovations come out.
Right, because there'll be a need and necessity. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, or if we don't do this, we're out of business. Yeah, that is a powerful motivator. It's also struck me watching the digital space, which is most of my career time, watching it evolve. The thing that's got a label and a trade name like Shard, like there was some guy who was just like, you know what? Let me try this. I think I could do this, or I've got an idea.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I quite enjoy about now versus 5, especially 10 years ago, is we've taken many of the capital cost constraints out of the way of, well, heck, let me give this a try. I mean, as you mentioned, well, let me spin up an AWS instance. Yeah, don't forget to turn it off, by the way. It's expensive, but let me spin up, 62 things and see if we can do yada 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 that no one's ever done before. We're starting to be able to experiment more quickly, more freely, without you need $5 million from a VC to even turn the lights on. Which is hopefully there's some really positive outcomes on the other side of that, with that affordance for experimentation.
I think you're right there too, right? Like, if you have an idea and some basic understanding, you can roll minimally proof of concept, minimum viable product, right? Like, I've got this idea, I think I can knock it out. And where it used to be just like, let me pull in my laptop and show you,
Right. It's a VB demo, but no, it's really going to be cool.
Right.
I love it.
It's amazing.
It is amazing. You live now in Chattanooga, Tennessee, correct?
That is correct. Yeah, Signal Mountain specifically.
That's a city that's got an innovation brand all its own because of the fiber infrastructure.
The fiber optics. Yeah, that is right.
Did that play a role in landing there?
Kinda. I mean, the folks that are, I'm sure, watching from Chattanooga, I will. Yes, 100%.
100%.
No, I mean, the story is my business partner lived here, and the community was looking for some wins, and we offered something they thought was so we were able to raise some seed money to get started here. And they've been very, very supportive of sort of helping us sort of through some slow times, right? Like, how come we're not selling more? I don't know.
Right. And if you're listening and you're not familiar with the backstory, Chattanooga made a really bold leap and put in a city or municipal fiber infrastructure, like the available bandwidth to a small business that's going to grow into a multi-billion record business is so good in Chattanooga, and it seems like that's paid off for the area, has it?
I think so. You know, it's been interesting. We've seen some startup successes. We have had some of those.
Mm-hmm.
None of them are from the outside monumental, like, oh, household name. They really,
Yeah.
really, oh, yeah, eBay started there. No, it
Right.
wasn't that, right?
Right.
We've had some successes. Um, we have a couple of interesting ones right now that are sort of growth industries. Logistics is a big one. So we should see, it's possible we could see some big stuff coming out of logistics within Chattanooga.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that surprised me, and I think we will also see relatively soon here, is where Chattanooga has historically been maybe a little more blue collar, logistics, transportation related stuff,
Mm-hmm.
where technology wasn't necessarily, again, 70s, 80s, wasn't even really on the radar.
Right.
Chattanooga Choo Choo. And with the investment, you've now had a workforce catch up with the infrastructure that's here.
Yeah.
And so I do believe we will get a big technology brand come to town and suck up all the talent, right? Where,
Yeah. Are you seeing an influx of people there, pandemic movers, for lack of a better label?
I'll be honest, I haven't left the house in like a year and a half, man.
But you read the news, man.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, there are people that are moving here. The interesting thing about the pandemic has been there's a lot of organizations, businesses, people that have said, I am no longer tied to a geographic area.
Right.
I can live where I want to
Live
live.
where I want. Yeah. Yeah.
And what was cool for us, I mean, we got to do that about 10 years before everyone else living in Port Townsend. That was a fantastic opportunity to live, within a mile of the water in every direction at the foot of the Olympic Mountains. I mean, there is not like the Northwest is, we've talked about this before. It's a beautiful place to live.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, our story has changed where we're now living here on Single Mountain, which is also gorgeous, but it's different.
Yeah.
And so I think what's interesting is the pandemic has made it so that same story that we or that question that we asked in 2004, could we live in Port Townsend and have a good life? And the answer was yes.
Yeah.
Other folks are asking that same question now. And so they're starting to move places like Chattanooga and Bellingham. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and Austin. Well, what struck me is where Chattanooga might be on the radar screen, where another town of the same size that hadn't made the same innovative shift early, is that implicit in the I can live anywhere is anywhere there's a good net connection.
And that is true, right? We have a full gig coming into our house.
Right. Wow. Nice. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Which helps when you have to get work done, right?
Right. I think I'm going to stream 7 movies while working because I can. I'm not going to watch them.
Yeah. No, it was science fiction. I was a telecommuter in '97. I moved from Seattle to Bellingham. Microsoft paid to run a T1 to my house. And
big deal you were.
T1 was a huge well, I had a boss that just wanted me to stick around. We had a good relationship. Right. But, what was it? Like a meg and a half? But that was
T1,
like huge at the time.
I remember we had a T1 line coming into our whole organization. When I worked at a company called iSalute in Bellevue, Washington, we had a T1 line coming in. It was amazing.
Yeah. And the phone company's going cha-ching, not realizing they're about to get sideswiped by that cable running down the ditch.
Right.
Yeah. I'll be interested to watch what does shape up for Chattanooga. I lived in Austin many moons ago.
Okay.
And I've got friends and relatives there, and Austin is 150 people a day right now moving there.
Oh, is it really?
It's ridiculous. Yeah.
And Austin's a cool town too, right? I mean, anytime you have the moniker keep town name here weird, know it's going to be a good one.
Yeah. And they've actually, I have to say, I go there maybe once a year, although not lately, and they've managed to keep it weird. Although look, there's a skyscraper above the the goofy little whatever. They kept the music scene too.
How do you grow while still maintaining your signature sort of culture?
Well, we both got time in the Northwest, and watching how Seattle exploded into a city, while Portland kind of intentionally kept some clamps on
Yeah.
and didn't get as big. I'm not sure that I don't think Portland got on the winning side of that equation, at least from a quality of life perspective. I,
Yeah. I don't know either.
yeah, I like Seattle in the rearview mirror these days. Thanks, not
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
not
For
as a
sure.
place to be. But anyway, and at the same time, Seattle is accidentally maybe, but it's become like cloud central, which is quite astonishing to watch.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
For sure.
Amazon plays a big role, obviously, but you got Amazon and Microsoft both like headquarters there.
Well,
Wow.
and there's so much talent
Yeah.
in that sort of metropolitan area. As we've grown as a business, the need for technical, I mean, the stuff that we do, there's only like 3 people in the world that know how to do it, right? And so if you don't have one of those people, you have to either become that or train it, right?
Right. Right.
And so how do you the need to be in a place where you can find those people
Mm-hmm.
quickly, that's where some place like Seattle is so appealing, right? Which is why you get someone like Google moving in and
Right.
all of these other brands, because
Facebook.
it's like Facebook. I bet if we move there, we could find the senior engineers that can scale Cassandra in a way that no one else
Yeah.
can.
Yeah.
They can make it bleed data out. and
Yeah. Yeah.
and I mean, it's that. I mean, the number. What is it? The 10x developer. I don't know if you remember that
Yeah.
concept
Yeah.
book.
Yeah.
That idea, like, if you hire the right person, or maybe it was 100x or 1000x. I don't remember what it was, but the whole concept was there's that one person that can do so much work
Yeah.
compared to everyone else.
Yeah.
They just can't make it up.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Smarter systems.
at the same time, maybe this is my guy who prefers small towns talking. I wonder if we'll start to say, you know what, talent's getting more geographically distributed.
Right.
Finding them is the hard part, but you look like open source as a innovation network all its own. You can't always tell where the next
Right.
kick-ass open source library is going to
Right.
come from, right? Which is kind of
Right.
cool. Maybe anywhere on the planet, which is exceptionally cool.
Yeah. And you're right. You're absolutely right about that. Um,
The notion. Have you read? There's a great book called The Social Life of Information. John Seeley Brown and Paul Duguid, written before Facebook existed. Interestingly enough, and the essential thesis of that book is the way people actually transfer information is by talking to each other and telling stories. Oh,
Right.
wow, no kidding, really. But now we're all telling stories on Zoom, right? It's not, you can't necessarily have the coffee shop or, the coffee and breakfast spot that they studied in that book for Xerox repairmen, if I recall right. So
Right.
maybe we're
Interesting.
distributing the conversation a bit more. I don't know. Okay, so we got to wrap it up so I don't tie up your entire day. We're going to close with the speed round.
Okay, I love the speed round.
Here
I've
we
been
go.
preparing. I've stretched out for the speed round.
Yeah.
I'm ready. I'm ready.
We'll try not to blow. We'll blow a mental hamstring here. Dogs, cats, both or neither.
Probably dogs, but I do like the cats too. I'm not a neither. I'm definitely closer to a both.
I know the answer to this already from the wonderful podcast that you do with Chris Marriott. But wine, beer, cocktail, water, or other.
Probably coffee. I mean, that is probably true.
Bingo. Yeah.
Both, all of the extraction methods. There's so much to it that you can do. Yeah, I like the nuance there.
Yeah, the side reference there, if you're listening, is go look for a podcast called Email Geeks Drinking Coffee. That's
Yep.
we got to talk to the host here. Last one. Name a favorite book or author.
Favorite author is probably Kurt Vonnegut. I've always loved reading his stuff. It's always it always has a, I want to say the twist before M. Night Shyamalan was the twist guy.
Yeah.
It's creative, it's clever, it's ironic usually. It's a pretty intelligent read.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very intelligent point of view. Yeah. And quite a craftsman. Like you could almost miss that unless you read a good bit of Vonnegut and you're like, this guy is really good at what he does.
And from Indianapolis, Indiana. Did you know that?
I did not know that. Wow.
Yeah, they have a museum there for him. It's like a one-room museum, but it's still a Kurt Vonnegut museum. Welcome to the Monkey House.
Yeah. Oh wow. Yeah. Now he's living still?
No, he passed away probably in the last 10 years or so. I mean, he was one of those sort of iconic, like please just live forever. Can we talk about cloning? You know?
We just lost Christopher Plummer today. I'm so bummed.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Just this morning, like maybe an hour or two ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, 91. Like,
Yeah, I mean,
and he
91.
was still. I watched the film he was in. That was no more than a year or two old. Like, dude was still on it and working.
Sure.
Well into his 80s. So salute, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Very good.
Well, we will have to have another one of these. I want to thank you for coming on. I'm delighted we finally got some time, and it's been a terrific learning experience already for me.
Well, I think so. I'd like that too. You find the people in the industry that you like, that you connect with, that you trust, and you spend time with them.
Yeah, you spend time with them. You figure out how to build more innovative stuff together.
Let's do it.
All right, we're signing off with Paul Schreiner from AudiencePoint. You can find more about their business on AudiencePoint.com. For the future of email marketing, this is Matthew Dunn signing off. Da-da-da-da.